I was born in Ghana, in Takoradi in Ghana, and I was there until we moved to England. It was a busy, noisy household, but I was a very quiet child, so that was quite difficult on occasion. But there were lots of books, and I read everything in the house, and when I ran out of books, I asked the neighbours for books, and then I was taken to the library for books. I spent a lot of my childhood on my own reading, and what I know now to have been the creation of quite an imagination. She was very aspirational, and education was everything for her. And what she did, which was extraordinary when I look back, was that she found a charity that would educate us. And that charity looked after me all the way through school, through university, and paid for me to go to bar school, without which I would not have been able to do very much. And in our family, you were going to be one of, I think, 3 or 4 things: a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, depending on the sort of child you were. And I think that they thought that because I loved books and words so much, that I'd be a lawyer. So they started to say that. And it didn't really mean anything to me until I went to the school that I'm talking about, started to really find me and my voice, started to act and sing, and really loved performing, started to debate and loved the argument and the ability to persuade. But mine was a very straightforward journey. So I went from university to bar school, and while I was at bar school, found pupillage, so that I finished bar school and started my pupillage at 4 Paper Buildings, which is where I have stayed throughout my career, and I'm now its head of chambers jointly with Charles Hale. They couldn't get rid of me. My mother was incredibly proud. When my name went on the board at 4 Paper Buildings, I thought she was going to burst. She couldn't believe it. I was very fortunate. 4 Paper Buildings was a common law set. They did all sorts of work, but I, having enjoyed studying family law, had 2 pupil mistress and master, I'm showing my age now, who did family law. They were right at the top of their tree in terms of what they did. And one of the most extraordinary gifts to me from my pupil mistress was that she had me sitting with her in counsel's row from the minute I became her pupil. And so there we'd be with the great names doing family law at the time, and I'd sit next to her and she'd say to everybody, well, she's been called to the bar, this is where she sits. And that had the effect of making the world think I was on my feet earlier than I was. So the High Court judges all knew me, solicitors knew me, and my senior clerk at the time, Albert Collins, he'd been in the bar for 50 years when he retired. He didn't really know what to do with women. He didn't know what to do with women of colour even more. But give him his due, he was also really prepared to be persuaded. So he had difficulty with relating to me to begin with. And then I got on my feet and he began to hear that I was doing all right. And then he was a great fan and huge supporter. I never struggled for work. Albert was always instrumental at getting me work. I was introduced to all sorts of people, and I was very lucky. I had a very carefully planned exit to have her, which didn't transpire at all. I finished work on a Friday thinking that I had 3 or 4 weeks before she arrived, and she arrived the Sunday after I'd finished work. And that's really been my daughter. That's the story of our lives, really. She kind of does things when she wants to. I had planned and was able to take a year off. During that year, my mother came from Ghana to help a little bit, and my own old nanny from Ghana also came to help a little bit. And it was just glorious. She couldn't believe that her charge had had her own daughter. And when I went back to work, we had the assistance of a nursery for a little bit. And when she started school, we had a nanny who remains a firm family friend of ours. The way I managed was that I worked really hard during the school term, and I was fortunate enough to be able to take pretty much all of her school holidays off. So that was how I managed working full on. It's so difficult to think at the time, am I getting this right? And the proof of the pudding, I guess, is in the young person that you produce. And somebody asked, a member of our family who is known for asking spiky questions, asked her recently what it had been like to have a full-time working mother. And she kind of assessed the situation. She said to her, well, you know what I've come to understand, that it's quality, not quantity. So when I started, I did all aspects of family law. So I did children work and financial remedy work. Increasingly realised that I wasn't sufficiently interested in the financial remedy side of things and began to focus on just doing children work. That meant I saw people really at their worst, most difficult times. You know, they were arguing over their children. Most parents are hardwired to believe that what they say and do is for their child's best interest, and here they are in deep disagreement. It was very difficult. And so there was a lot of negativity and a lot of destruction. And in around probably 2 or 3 years after I had my daughter, I was introduced to mediation, the idea that you would sit together, however challenging, and find a solution. And I didn't look back. I, in 2003, began to really research into it. And in 2004, I told my senior clerk that I was going to, at great expense, qualify as a mediator. He thought it was the most ridiculous thing. And he said to me, I don't know whether you've read the room, Barbara, but here we go to court. We're a barrister's chambers. We don't stop people from going into court. And I said to him with a boldness, I don't know how I had it, but I said to him, Michael, I'll train as a mediator, and the people who pay me to go to court will pay me to stay out of court. And so it began. And I built then, from then, a mediation practice that I'm really, really proud of. In 2020, I became a KC on the 16th of March 2020. It was the most incredible day. The sun shone in the temple, and it was, you know, I had family came over from all over the world, and it was just joyous. I have always been concerned about fairness and equality, and the idea that talent isn't enough on its own to enable you to succeed. I say that because my very start in England was testament to that. If that charitable foundation hadn't invested in us, it doesn't matter how clever I was, we were sinking at the time they came along and scooped us all up, that it would have been impossible. So I was on the Equality, Diversity and Social Mobility Committee, and in 2019-2020, when the Bar Council decided in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, and which was the time when everybody was looking at, you know, how inclusive are we, what are we doing in our space in terms of equality and diversity. And the Bar Council, like many other organisations, also looked at itself and decided that it needed a task and deliver group, a race working group that would look at the issue of race at the bar. I was invited to be the co-chair of that committee together with Simon Regis, CBE. And together we led that group through the investigative stage and collecting the data and making recommendations for a report. I was by then really interested in being even closer to the decision making. I'd always aspired to the idea of leading the bar, By then I knew that I had something to say. I had something to say about family law, which is the work that I've done for 34 years. I had something to say about equality and diversity. And I had something to say about how you sustain a practice, by which I mean not just, I'm a woman at the bar, but how am I doing? Am I being paid properly? Am I being paid fairly? How am I doing on well-being? So I thought, well, I've got something to say. It'll be different from what is being said before. I'm always saying we won't change the statistics about who is running the show, who is around, who is at the decision-making table, if those of us who are eligible don't put our hands up. So I kind of boxed myself into a bit of a corner, because if I was going to practice what I preached, it was then time to put my hand up, which I did. Look at what we have already achieved. We have so many positions now that have been filled by women. I will be the 5th chair of the bar, the first of colour, but the 5th chair of the bar. We have now, right at the top of the judiciary, a lady Chief Justice. I was in Court 4, the Lady Chief's Court, when our current Lord Chancellor took the oath of office on the Quran. Like I never thought I'd see that day. And she took her oath on the Quran. The Solicitor General was in the room. She's also a woman. So in terms of representation and the overall message that we can for sure, but we have work to do. We can't be complacent. It is outrageous that in 2024 at the bar, women earn less than men. And no, it is not because we have babies, because the survey shows that from the very beginning of their careers, women are earning less. So we have to use the data to encourage women to be their own strong advocates and have those practice reviews and have those income reviews and say, why am I earning what I'm earning? Is it something to do with the way the woman bills or the sort of work that she's being allocated? We push for that. I think we also now have the ability to really raise well-being and that idea of a sustainable career, so that it's not just about how hard you work, it's about working smarter. When you go off to have a child, what is the parental leave? Those are the things that if we focus on, we make the next 100 years a much better, more successful, more sustainable place for women. But we are there, we are doing great things. We just have to do that much more to make sure that women not only join the profession, stay in the profession and progress.